From the EPR Creation Studio, this is Unconquered with Doc Staples. As always, this podcast brought to you by EPR Creations, bringing you the best of internet marketing and website development for an affordable price. By Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida. By Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina. Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida. And Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And guys, it is a good time to buy real estate. It's starting to, the rates are coming down. And if you want to know more about rates or anything else in terms of that, and you live in Florida, Tennessee, or Kentucky in particular, although he can make sure that you're connected with proper people from Benchmark Mortgage all over, give Justin Galloway a call. And if you're in Jacksonville or the greater Research Triangle area, the place to go to sell your place or to buy a place is Luis Marquez and Shen Newsma. Those are the people to deal with. Let them know you heard about them from Unconquered with Doc Staples. All right, here we are. Another preview as the season marches along. And this time, another conference game, which is so weird to say about SMU. And the thing is, SMU has essentially a power conference history. It's just been a really long time, going back to the Pony Express days that got them the death penalty for a while and then left out of the Big 12 and all of those things that developed after that. So this is a program that's been starved. It's had a strong fan base and all of that, and it's been starved for big time success and big time exposure. And the moment they came into the ACC, you're talking about a lot of money pouring into that program, and there is a lot of money that SMU has to throw around. There's a lot of oil barons, a lot of old oil money that they have to burn, and that's why they were able to come into the ACC and say, "Nah, we don't need TV money. Well, we just want the platform to be able to play in a big boy conference," which jokes on them on that one. But anyway, they wanted to play in a conference with the seat at the table, and they were willing to basically take no money for that because, well, they don't need money. And what a luxury for that situation. But that makes them a real threat. And this is something that we talked about on this podcast when they came into the conference of, well, SMU probably is a top 4 or 5 program in this conference very, very rapidly. Within probably 2 or 3 years, and it might be earlier than that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this transpires. They've gone out and they've been very aggressive in the transfer portal, pulling in, Power 4, Power 5, Power 3, however you want to calculate it, players, and loading out their roster. And you watch them play, and they've got athletes. They've got players on both sides of the ball. 3-1 so far, 1 loss against BYU in a game that they didn't really play all that well. Probably if you played that game over and over again, that's pretty close to a 50-50 split, and that's not a bad BYU team. So coming off a 66-42 win over TCU. Now 66 is a little bit deceiving. I mean, you might think that means that they just marched the ball up and down the field the whole game, and that's not exactly right because 28 of those points were basically defense and special teams, and they very nearly had another special teams touchdown there as TCU basically self-destructed in that game. And SMU has been essentially a really good turnover-producing team so far, and TCU was very generous in that game with 4 turnovers, actually 5 turnovers, and then SMU turned it over as well. So SMU was +4 in that one. So you look at the season from them, and they were -1 against Nevada in a game that they very nearly lost. That was an INT. Then +2 against in the bloodbath in the massacre over FCS Houston Christian, and then even basically there was a turnover fest in that game against BYU. 3 turnovers for both teams in that game, and then 5 turnovers forced and 1 given up against TCU. And you can kind of look at their record here. And when they were -1 against an overmatched Nevada team, they very nearly lost. When they were even against a pretty much evenly matched BYU team, they lost. And then when they were up when they were +4, they managed to do a lot of damage to TCU, though TCU was able to move the football pretty well on them. So this is an interesting matchup in a lot of ways, and there's a lot to think about in terms of what might happen here. I've gone back and forth a lot on this game and what can be expected here as I've watched this SMU team and studied them a little bit in the two games that really matter. And this is a game that Florida State can win, but it's certainly not a game that is a walkover against an opponent that you just flat out overmatch. There's some talent on that side, and in some areas that are inconvenient for Florida State, given some of Florida State's weaknesses this year. So let's go ahead and talk first about SMU on offense and Florida State on defense here. So breaking down the SMU offense. Now, first of all, this is a Rhett Lashley team. Florida State fans very familiar with Rhett Lashley. He was the offensive coordinator under Gus Malzahn at Auburn when Florida State played Auburn in the 2014 BCS national title game for the 2013 season, of course. So familiar with him from there. And actually I got a chance to get to know him a little bit during the lead up to that. Got to spend a little bit of time talking to him and all that. I was really impressed at the time. You all will remember, those of you who've been listening to this podcast for 10 plus years will remember me talking about Rhett Lashley as a guy, as a riser, as an up and comer, as a guy that really impressed me. He's going to be a future good head coach, et cetera, et cetera. Well, he's found a good spot and a spot where he can be competitive and has lots of money to deal with for transfer portal, for recruiting, for his coaches' salaries, et cetera. And a position where, he's just got a lot of support, but a program that hasn't been so successful in recent years that there's a ton of pressure yet. So it's a good job for him. And obviously he also, since then, he was at Miami as the offensive coordinator under Manny Diaz and had some success there as well. And he actually ran the best offenses that Miami has had, Miami, Florida, of course, that Miami, Florida has had in the last decade up until this year with Cam Ward, where suddenly Miami looks like an offensive juggernaut. So he's had a lot of success, and he has a very clear system that he likes to run, very much from the Gus Malzahn tree. A lot of similarities to what Mike Norvell does because of that. So, I mean, again, Norvell also a branch a little bit further removed from the Malzahn tree, but some similarities. I mean, if you read their playbooks, if you look at Lashley's playbook and you look at Norvell's playbook, there's a lot of shared terminology and a lot of the installs and things that are done very similarly. So yeah, that's what this offense is. Now, Lashley also going to tend towards being a bit more up tempo, high tempo, a little bit closer to the tree, a little bit closer to the trunk of the tree in terms of the Malzahn system in that respect. He will throw the football more than Gus does, but hurry up, no huddle type stuff, more of an emphasis for Lashley than what Norvell has done in the past in that respect, though Norvell's gone fast at times. But Lashley wants to go fast. He wants to run the football and wants to present a lot of problems, a lot of conflict for you at the linebacker, safety, in the secondary type stuff, to cause problems and then create big plays. Essentially, that's what he does. And they're going to be pretty varied in the running game, as most Malzahn tree system teams do. They're going to base out of an inside zone type look, but they also are going to run outside zone. They're going to run a lot of quarterback run. They're going to run some counter. They're going to run some single wing based stuff. They're going to run outside zone, G down, these sorts of things. They're going to run a lot of different looks. They'll run ISO insert, where you're getting the H back inserting into a gap to serve as an ISO lead blocker on a linebacker. There's a lot that they do that causes some problems, and then they'll layer that with a bunch of RPOs where they'll throw the glance route behind you if your backers trigger too quickly. Joke's on them. Florida State's backers don't trigger. So, well, okay. In fairness, they started to against Cal, but anyway, they do a lot of those things that cause a lot of problems, and this offense really changed pretty radically against BYU. And I was actually surprised when I discovered that they had made a switch at quarterback, because Preston Stone had been successful last year, and then game 3 they make a switch all of a sudden, and Preston Stone had some early preseason accolades and all of that he was expected to play really well, and then they made a switch. Kevin Jennings played in each of the first 3 games, and then finished the BYU game, and then started the next game. He started against TCU and had success. And I was surprised to see that happen, because again, you've got a younger quarterback overtaking a guy who was their starter, their primary guy, who had success last year. And you normally don't see that. And then I went back through the BYU game and went, yeah, that's why that happened. That makes a lot of sense, because they look different on offense with Jennings as opposed to Stone. It's a different look, and I think they're a better team with Jennings, and a tougher offense to defend with Jennings at quarterback. And the reason for that is that he is a true dual threat guy. Whereas Stone against BYU was sacked a couple times and sort of struggled to be able to run that offense with the kind of pressure that he was under. Jennings takes over, and all of a sudden as soon as there's any pressure, he's escaping the pocket, breaking things down with his feet, and then makes aggressive throws into seams on the run. He is a quarterback who both can run and he's probably a high 4.5 type guy, moves really well. But when he scrambles initially to throw, and he will, just kind of be a gunslinger and put the ball into the crossers or little seams, little curls between zones and all of that as he's scrambling. Aggressive player on the run that can cause a lot of problems. Actually, some similarities between him and what you saw from Georgia Tech. Sort of similar, the way that he and Haynes King will break the pocket, a lot of times moving to the right, but they like to break the pocket. They'll have the ball out there, and then they'll make a throw on the run aggressively to somebody 10, 15 yards upfield from that position. Now, he's not as good a deep ball thrower as Haynes King, and he is not as big and strong as Haynes King. I mean, Haynes King is, I think people forget how big he is. He's 6'3", 215. What you got here with the quarterback with Jennings, 6 foot 185. So pretty significant difference in that respect. But stylistically, in terms of being able to break the pocket, carry the ball out there kind of like a loaf of bread, in the throwing hand, and then just flick it to get the ball upfield, some similarities. Actually, similarities to Cam Ward on the move as well, in terms of how he plays. So a little bit of a preview of what you're going to see at Miami, in terms of Miami, Florida, in terms of future on the schedule. So the first order of business in this game, the first thing you're concerned about is the quarterback as a dual threat guy and as a runner. You look at what they're looking at on offense. He's their second leading rusher, 25 carries, 137 yards, 5.48 yards per carry. He hasn't taken a lot of sacks. So, that's not great in terms of Florida State and what they've struggled with so far this season. They've struggled against guys that can move and break down your defense with their legs and make some throws on the run. One of the reasons that they won last week is that they did not face a quarterback that presents that threat to that degree. And this week, that's what they're looking at again. And so they're going to have to figure out how to handle this, and that's going to put some pressure on the safeties and on the linebackers. And, the safeties are not in a position right now where they're able to, play 117 miles an hour, coming downhill, because of his ability to get the ball upfield and, put it right behind him if they play a little bit too loose. So that's the biggest concern that you look at coming into this game that I see. Now, they also have a dynamic running back in Brashard Smith. And again, this is a guy transfer from Miami, followed Rhett Lashley to SMU. And there are 9 transfers from Miami on this team, at least 9 that I noted. So yeah. And one of them, Jalen Knighton, was the starting running back coming into the season. Knighton got hurt against BYU. I think it was a play where he tried to hurdle a guy going out of bounds and landed wrong. At least that's what it looked like to me when I was going through that game. I didn't see him again after that one. So if it wasn't that play, I'm not sure, but that looked to me to be when it happened. Not that it matters, but Brashard Smith has taken over since then and honestly has been better than Jalen Knighton was. He's now 53 carries, averaging 7.17 yards per carry, and looked outstanding against TCU. Now, TCU defensively has some problems, but Smith, in the time that I've gotten to see him, and also against BYU, very solid player and an explosive player. I mean, I thought he was a guy that Miami kind of wasted when he was there. He was the guy, you remember going back, if you go back to an early preview from a year or two ago, he was the guy I was actually concerned about. If they figured out how to use him, look out. And well, Rhett Lashley has discovered him, and look out. 14 carries for 75 yards against a good BYU defense. They started with Knighton in that game. Knighton got hurt and had not been as effective. And then all of a sudden, Brashard Smith came in and was making plays. And then 18 carries for 127 yards against TCU. And they have found themselves in terms of the running game now, where between a quarterback who's a legit threat as a runner, and they'll run quarterback power, they'll run some quarterback zone. They're doing the whole complement of quarterback run game, and they've got an extended playbook when it comes to that stuff under Rhett Lashley. They're running the whole playbook in terms of 11-man running game. And then you put a Brashard Smith who can really fly as the main back there. They've got weapons. The third back coming into the year is LJ Johnson. He was in the concussion protocol after getting dinged up against TCU. I'm not sure what his status is for this game, but another guy that's averaging just under 5 yards a carry on the season, and quality back. So that's what the big concern is for them coming into the game. If you're looking at Florida State's defense, the big problem that they've had so far is stopping the run. And they're playing against a team that wants to run the ball, and run the ball some more with a running quarterback, which has been a problem. So that's the problem that Florida State's going to have to face. These linebackers, these safeties are going to have to trigger well. They're going to have to know before they go, but then they have to come downhill and they have to tackle in space. And that's something that this team has not done very well. Now, in terms of passing, they've been okay. Jennings he's been good. 61% passer, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. He's been pretty accurate, but he also has put the ball in danger a couple times. He is a bit of a gunslinger, and I don't think he has a super strong arm to be able to threaten you a bunch downfield. There have been a couple plays that he's tried to make where he's tried to make some downfield throws, setting his feet or whatever, and the ball's come up short on some things where he's tried to drive it. So I'm not persuaded that he has a super strong arm, but the problem that you face with him is he does locate it well on the crossing routes. They'll run mesh, they'll run, this is where you have 2 shallow cross routes that are rubbing each other. And against a defense like Florida State, everybody likes to run that. He locates on the rail route, up and wheel route up the sideline really well. He throws a lot of curls and stick routes and all of that, and he puts it right on guys, puts it on their face mask, and throws with some accuracy there, which is a problem because again, these are concepts that Florida State's defense has given up on this season. They've struggled to pass off routes underneath at times. The communication has not been great. Although it was a good bit better against Cal, there's been some growth there. That's something they're going to have to continue to grow on. They're going to have to continue to get better at, because this has been a problem for them all season. And this is something that Lashley does a bunch of. He likes to create conflict in the secondary. He likes to run a bunch of crossers. They're going to run a bunch of boot. They like to get Kevin Jennings. Again, he's only 6 foot. They like to get him on the move, outside the pocket, on play action, these sorts of things, to where they like to run, your standard flood stuff. So you get layered over route or drive route, crossing route, along with a flat route. And then they'll have maybe a wheel route and then something else, in there. They like to have these kinds of layered options for him to play high-low on the move to one half of the field. FSU's defensive front is going to have to do a great job of keeping him contained on the inside without giving him upfield lanes to be able to take advantage of. And then the secondary is going to have to do a great job of communicating and making sure that they're properly matching those routes. But he's been very good at locating in those spaces against zone type defenses, and then against man stuff, those guys are running away. So this is what they like to do. It's not the best matchup for Florida State in terms of style, just because of what FSU has struggled against this year. But I think personnel-wise, FSU's defensive line should be able to win most of their matchups up front against an SMU offensive line that I've not been super impressed by them so far. They've done all right. They were okay against BYU, but they did give up a bunch of pressure in the passing game. When they went straight drop back or play action, BYU was able to get pressure. And these are guys that are a little bit closer to Memphis in terms of the bodies, offensive line bodies, than they are, say, to what Boston College brought to Tallahassee. So, are they going to push you around? Probably not, but you're going to have to play well enough to beat them, because they do play sound football on the offensive line. So, but I think that's where you do have your big advantage, is trying to get them to that point. And, you look at the rushing numbers against BYU, 3.25 yards per carry. Now, yes, that was not a game where Jennings played the whole game and they were set to really take advantage of everything that he does. But you still look at, 4 yards a carry. You can live with that. If Florida State gives up, 4 or just a little bit fewer yards per carry, you feel like you've got a shot to win this football game, given what SMU, brings to the table overall in the passing game and all of that. Now, in terms of receivers and all that, they have some Miami transfers, and Romello Brinson. They've got some guys that are athletes that can move. There's not really one bell cow guy that you go, okay, that's their number one, but they have a bunch of guys that move well enough to be decent options and to beat you downfield once in a while. Their leading receiver is actually their tight end, RJ Maryland, who's probably the best tight end Florida State has played, and certainly a really good athlete. And again, that's a bad thing for FSU, because where have they struggled? Teams that can take advantage of the linebackers and the safeties. And that's what SMU is going to do here. So not the best matchup in that respect. But again, the good thing is that this is a team that probably is not as much of a big play threat in the passing game as they are a team that is going to try to run the football on you all sorts of ways. And allegedly that was supposed to be a strength coming in. And if your backers and safeties can kind of figure out how to handle things at this point, the defensive line did look like it woke up a little bit against Cal. So, there's a chance there, but I look at these numbers. I look at what SMU has done against other teams and, comparables and all of that. BYU's defense is kind of comparable, I think. 18, they lost 18-15 against BYU. They scored 38 offensive points against TCU. And you look at the overall, total numbers, yards per play, they went 3.63 yards per play, not very good against BYU, and then 6.15, which is very good against TCU. So they're kind of in between. I don't think they're the strongest offense FSU has played so far, but again, some problems with the matchup. I think somewhere in the 5 to 5.5 yards per play is probably to be expected in this one, given where FSU has been. It's entirely possible, if certain things click, the backers and safeties figure things out, you could give up under 5 yards of play against this team. I mean, you saw it against BYU. That also, though, they had 3 turnovers against BYU. I don't think that's, that they're as likely to do that. But this is a team, again, this game could go a lot of different ways. We'll talk about that more in the final segment. But this is a team that has turned it over. There's a lot of variance in terms of how they've been offensively. We'll see. But right now, if I had to guess, somewhere around 5 yards, 5 to 5.25 yards per play, or 5.5 yards per play, somewhere in there would probably be my expectation against this SMU offense, and somewhere around 24 points for them. And the question is, can Florida State score 24 points against anybody, against air? That's the question. And to that, we now turn. In terms of defense, well, SMU has a bunch of Miami transfers on the defensive line. And, some of these guys, folks will remember. You've got Jafari Harvey at what they call the bandit, the rush end position. You've got Jared Harrison Hunt on the interior there at the defensive tackle spot. And then you've got Elijah Roberts, 6'4", 295 as their big end. And he's really the bell cow up front for them. But, you've got a bunch of guys that were recruited as blue chip type guys for programs that are rivals to Florida State. So you got some horses, you got some athletes out there in the defensive line, and a team that defensively has some bodies. And, I've been impressed by their linebackers, Kobe Wilson, Ahmad Walker, and by their safeties, Ahmad Moses, Isaiah Nwokobia. Those guys all impress me in terms of coming downhill, triggering quickly from the backer position, being able to cover, and then those safeties coming downhill and tackling in space. They play aggressively, and they play confident and fast, and it's a team that does load up to stop the run. And again, that's a problem in terms of matchups for FSU. In terms of their run defense on the season, they've been pretty good. Gave up 3.44 yards per carry on 43 carries at Nevada, 3.83 yards per carry on 35 carries against Brigham Young, and BYU wants to run the football. I mean, Kalani Sitake, that's what they do. They run the football. They ran it for 3.83 yards per carry against this team, and 2.03 yards per carry from TCU. TCU did almost all their damage in the air. And that was partly why TCU struggled so much in terms of turnovers. Couldn't run the football. So this is a team they're going to load up and try to stop the run, and that's what Florida State wants to do. And so far, FSU hasn't shown the ability to beat you in the air. So this comes down to, can they find a way to start to run the football against a team that has the bodies up front and has the scheme and has the guys in the second level who can tackle to potentially limit and stop your run game. And, I do think that their corners can be beaten. I think especially this is a game. If Florida State wins this game, I think one of the reasons is because Hakeem Williams stepped forward and started to become the guy that they hope he can become. Because this is a game that is really made for him. There are some matchups out there that he can actually take advantage of. Question is, can they at quarterback get the football to him? I think if you took either one of SMU's quarterbacks and put them on Florida State wins this game by double digits. But to date, Florida State's offense looks like it's been trying to swim with concrete shoes on, the very concrete shoes that DJU wears in games. And, it's tough sledding at this point on that. So, what can we expect? They're giving up 2.8 yards per carry on the season in the run game. Florida State's only averaging, let's see, looking at it here, this is not the best podcasting, but Florida State's averaging 2.35 yards per carry, which is horrendous. Think about it this way. SMU is one of the best run defenses in the country statistically at this point. Now, adjusted for opponent, that's a different thing. but they've got a good run defense. And if Florida State averages what SMU has been giving up per carry, Florida State's average per carry goes up. It's nuts, guys. I mean, they averaged 3.1 yards per carry, 3.16 against Georgia Tech, 1.31 against Boston College, 1.54 yards per carry against Memphis, and 2.61 yards per carry against California. Big jump, 2.61. Here's the thing. A couple things. First of all, if I'm running the football against this SMU team, I'm trying to run. I'm wanting to go straight at them and use my offensive line size and my big back. I mean, I want to run with Cam Davis a decent amount in this game, but I want to run straight at them. And if I'm going to average 3.5, 4 yards a carry, that's fine. I'm just going to keep handing that ball off, run inside zone, run, your insert, your ISO type stuff on the interior, and just get in a track and try to go downhill and basically play bully ball downhill. Not so much pulling, not a bunch of stuff right now. Just try to get guys moved vertically and play that way. Why? Because I think you can get some displacement against their defensive line. They've got some quickness, and they do have at the big end, they've got some size there. But I think you can start to push them vertically there. And then I do think as they start to try to compress in there, you can start to get some bouncing where a good back is going to be able to bounce and get to the edge on some of that. I think this is an inside zone type game. The other thing, though, I look at this and, given the way that they load up against the run and they're going to give you some one-on-ones and all that, if you can take a few shots and just hit a few vertical throws, this game completely changes, because then they have to honor that. They have to play a different game than they want to up front, and you're going to be able to run it. So much hinges on whether or not you're able to hit a couple of those early in the game, and I'm still not persuaded that they can. But if they do, things change. So, I think if FSU averages 5 yards a play, 5.5 yards a play in this game, that's probably what it's probably in the area that they could win this game. They've so far averaged on the season 4.63 yards per play. They can get to 5 in this one. It's a coin flip game. Can they do it? I don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence that they're ready to move the football or do anything else. I mean, a couple things in terms of blocking last week looked like they'd gotten a little bit better, but we'll see. So now getting into the final portion of the show, should also mention that SMU has some really good return units, and they've got one of the best kickers. They probably get the best kicker Florida State will face, or certainly one of the two best kickers Florida State will face this year. So they will, if they get inside the 35, 30-yard line, they're gonna get 3 points if you don't turn them over. So that's another factor here. The reason that they beat Cal last week is that wasn't the case. In this week, if SMU is able to get into that zone, even if you are able to stop them, once they get inside your 40, they're probably still scoring. They're probably still coming away with 3. So worth noting. They also, again, have excellent return units. You're going to have to be very good in terms of special teams on this. Brashard Smith, their kickoff return specialist, very, very good there. And then their punt returner, Roderick Daniels, had a long one for a score against TCU, and you could see the speed and capacity in that one. So they're a fairly complete team in that respect. And this is ultimately a game. Florida State should win this game. They should. Do I trust this Florida State team to win this game because of the way that these matchups set up and the kind of play that they've gotten at quarterback? I can't pick it. So ultimately, I think this is one of those. Look, if I weren't doing this for podcasts, for covering this team and all this, I'm not sure I'd be watching these games, because this has just been really ugly football to watch. I don't mind low-scoring games if it's because the defenses are so good and the hitting is great and the execution on that side of the ball is just suffocating. That's good football. So far, Florida State's not been playing good football, and I can't really trust him to play good football. So ultimately, I think this is another game that's a bit of an ugly game, similar to the California game. I think there's going to be a lot of similarities there. Cal only scored 9. I think it's going to be tough to hold a Rhett Lashley offense to 9 points. I don't see that happening. I think SMU gets to 20, and I'm not sure Florida State can get to 20. So I'm going to go with SMU winning this game in Dallas, 20-17. I think this is close to a coin flip game, maybe a 55 to 58%, somewhere in there, likelihood of SMU winning. So it's going to be, I think, a very competitive game. But I just, at this point, I can't. Florida State is in the show me stage for me. They're going to have to show me that they can actually win this kind of game and that they can score more than 20 points against anybody. Yes, I know they scored 21 against Georgia Tech. Fine. Okay. But can they get there again? We'll see. But that's my pick. I'm going SMU 20, Florida State 17. That'll do it for us today. Talk to y'all after the game. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Post and repost episodes on social media and tell a friend. And if you haven't left a review in a while, do it again. It really does help the visibility of the podcast. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my advertising partners once more. That's EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag. I am especially grateful for those of you at the Dynasty level. That is Brian Leininger, Dave Blair, Jack Horton, Jonathan Kennedy, Lee Caswell, Travis Smith, and Tyler Kashishki. You all are far more generous than I deserve. Thanks to you all. You all are far more generous than I deserve. I'm really grateful. Thanks to you all. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening and thanks for your support. I made this.